everywhere. All right. So hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I am HP Holo. I write things, and very often I talk to other people who write things. And today I have Jane Lindskold on the show, who is the author of one of my absolute favorite series ever, of which book 3 is currently out. So before we start diving into that, just a few little logistical things. We are giving away a free signed copy of House of Rough Diamonds. If you would like to enter to win that, there is a form in the description wherever you're watching, unless you're watching on Twitter, in which case you have to go to either YouTube or Twitter, the Bane channels, to find this event and click on the event or click on the entry form there. I'm also going to put the form in the chat so that you guys can access it there. In fact, I am going to do that right now. And there we go. It's up there for anyone watching. So go put your name in. We'll pick a random winner and you will get a signed book after this is over. So do it. All right. So now we're going to begin our show. So Jane Lindskold, introduce yourself. What'd you write? Where can we find your stuff? Hi, John. We have a viewer already in the comments. So all right. What would you like us to know about you? Because I think everything about you is cool, but you have certain things that you probably think are coolest. So go for it.
Oh, that is just no pressure. I'm really boring. I write books. I play with cats. I do a variety of crafts. I garden in a desert, which has got to be one of the most stupid uphill things ever to want to do. I'm a gamer. I'm an anime geek since way back to when you had to explain to people what anime was, as in it was still being called Japamation. So
those were the days, Japanimation. Oh my gosh.
I mean, I go way back. I go back to when most stuff was fan subtitled.
See, I'm like a little baby anime fan. I came in during the Toonami days in the late in like 1999, 2000 era.
Yeah, well, you've been around. You've been around. So there
I do recognize the term Japanimation though, so I'm sorta in the same area.
Yeah, well, so that's me. If you bump into me at a con, start talking any of those topics, and I will bore you to tears.
We have just about everything in common, except I don't garden in a desert. I garden in the southern U.S., which is not a desert.
No, I used to live in Virginia, and I've been down to exactly your town to visit my buddy David Weber.
So you know our climate. It's good gardening weather.
I sprained my ankle in Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh no. Well, hopefully next time you're down here, you will leave with a better memento than a sprained ankle. All right. So you've written the Overwear series, which is the main one that I've read. What else have you written? I know you've got. I'll let you talk. You're the author.
I've written a lot. I've got over 30 novels published. I've kind of forgotten, and over 80 short stories. Most people know me for the Firekeeper saga, which features a young woman raised by wolves who thinks she really is a wolf. You went away.
You're the one talking. I'm making you the important one here.
Yeah, but I get lonely.
Okay, I'll leave me up.
Good. So there are 8 books in that series. I have a 2-book series called the Artemis series, which is sort of a space opera planet side about, well, it's complicated. 3 books in the Breaking the Wall series, which is contemporary fantasy with a Chinese base.
Oh, cool.
A whole bunch. And I've written in collaboration with David Weber. We do the Star Kingdom books. I'm also the person who was the godmother to the entire anthology series. Because I was the one who suggested the idea, and I've had stories in a bunch of the anthologies. Queen Elizabeth sort of belongs to me a little bit. Cool. And her brother Michael and his brother Michael's wife. Yeah, I write whatever I feel like, which means I'm hard to classify.
That is both the best and worst type of writing, because I like, as speaking from someone who also writes that way, because it's like I often really have stories that I want to write, but I'm also in charge of the marketing for me and my husband. And sometimes when it comes down to sitting down and figuring out how to market certain books, it's like, what do we even do with this? It's a good book, but how do we help it find its audience?
Right. And there is the question of how do you help something find an audience, but there's the question of how do I live with myself first thing in the morning? And I found out a long time ago that if I had to do the same thing over and over again, I'd quit writing. I'd be bored.
Yep.
Well, I'm
Same
afraid
here.
I'm always going to be a little bit of a challenge to the marketing niche.
But that also makes your writing really unique and fun to encounter. And in fact, that's one of the things I really love about the Overware series. The thing that I personally love about Overware is that it plays on a lot of tropes in a really clever way. And for some context, my first career was in young adult publishing. Well, not publishing, but I worked in teen services at my local library, and so everything I consumed was young adult literature and children's literature. And you very often in that genre, have the young person has to save the world despite not necessarily being ready to do it trope. And whenever I came upon Library of the Sapphire Wind, which, first of all, the title just got me. It's so intriguing because I love everything libraries, and I had no idea what Sapphire Wind was, but it sounded neat. And then I pick it up, and it's very much an inversion of that trope, where you've got these retired ladies going on the adventure, but being summoned by the precocious youths. And they're not saving the world necessarily, but they've got some really significant things to do. And I was immediately intrigued by that sort of generational interplay. And so first of all, for those who are brand new to the Overware series, I want to have you describe it in general. Like what's the simple way you would describe this series?
I'm terrible at that. Basically, you kind of touched on why I came up with the idea. I love portal fantasy. I always have loved portal fantasy. But even as a kid, I had two questions. And one of them was, why kids? And the other was what kids did who spent formative parts of their life in another world. Well, Seanan McGuire did a wonderful book called Every Heart a Doorway that really did a great job of answering the question of what happens afterwards. And it's not necessarily a happy book, but it's a beautiful book. And I thought, well, Seanan handled that. I'm going to handle the other one. So and the other thing I wanted to do is we always have these mentor characters who are dealt with in, they're like Gandalf or Dumbledore. They're creatures of mystery who apparently have all the answers, but they're not going to share them with you. So I decided it would be really fun to, instead of having my characters summoned to be the savers of the world or anything, they would be summoned to be mentors to some very nice but somewhat confused young people. And when they take the job on, they know flat out that they're being lied to, that they're not getting the full story. But, well, that's what late teens, early 20-somethings do when they've got issues that they want help on, but they don't really want to realize how in over their head they are.
Yes.
So that was another thing I wanted. I wanted volunteers. I did not want this to be one of those books where they spend half their time going, I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. I'm so damn miserable. I just want to go home.
I'm always the sort of reader when I hate where that happens in books too, because speaking as a reader, it's like, I want the adventure. And like, if I personally were thrown into a realistic situation like that, yeah, I would probably whine about it because, I want to be home playing video games. I don't want to be saving the world. But me as a reader experiencing that story, I want to experience the fun adventure. I don't want to experience a character whining about that.
Yeah. So I decided to make my characters volunteers, and by having them be ladies of a certain age who had already had lives at home and maybe were just not ready to slow down and retire when everybody is telling them it's time for you to slow down and retire.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fun. And
I
I've had a
absolutely
wonderful
love
time with it.
I love that they're summoned from a book club, and I love that once they arrive and meet the three youth characters, they kind of have this. Well, we really don't have anything else we're doing at home necessarily, so let's help these kids out. It's very laid back in a way, even though they're going on this grand adventure, and I love it's how I would picture some of the elderly people in my family accepting an adventure like that, because my family's just like that. Like we
Yeah.
all have our crazy little adventures that we go on, but
Mhm.
I really loved that aspect.
Yeah.
So I mean, in this story, in this series, you've got magical libraries, you've got magical artifacts, you've got anthropomorphic characters. There's just a whole bunch of really cool stuff in it. And so I'm curious, when you were designing the world itself, what came first, the characters or the world?
With me, they interweave. The characters, I wanted theranthropic characters.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to decide what kind of world would it be.
Mm-hmm.
And you told me before we started, you're currently reading Aurora Borealis Bridge.
Yep.
And you get a lot of answers at the end of that book as to why things are the way they are in this world. So I'm not going to give you any spoilers.
Okay.
But there is a reason. But when I decided to do this book, like I said, I've done a lot of books and I felt like pulling out the stops. And I've often written, my Firekeeper saga is, for all that it's fantasy, it's very real world grounded. Mm. One of my editors at that time referred to it as science fantasy. Mm. You know, everything works very carefully designed. I wanted flying ships. It was my turn, you know. I wanted flying ships.
There's nothing better than a good flying ship.
And animal-headed people and talking birds and all the things that I hadn't yet done. So I put them all in.
Haru is one of my favorites. That I already was enjoying the novel, but when they got Overwhere and suddenly there is a talking carrier pterodactyl, I was like, I'm in. This is my book. I love it.
Yeah, I like Haru a lot too. He talks sort of like this. Hey, brown. He's great. Fun to do at readings.
I would read like entire series about Haru. I mean, he's great. He's a fun little character, and I don't think he where I'm reading, he doesn't show up a whole lot, but in the scenes where he's there, he's this really nice little background being, and he's a really fun element of the world.
Yeah, he has his own opinions on things.
Yes.
It would probably be fun at some point to do a short story just from Haru's point of view.
Oh, you should absolutely do that. I would love it. Oh, we got more people in the comments already. So hello to Duke and Lance. And of course, you guys, if you have any questions for Jane about the series or about writing in general or about whatever, just put them in the comments and I will ask and we will get answers. So here's one of my questions. I really love the particular types of characters that you chose for Teg, Peg, and Meg. You've got an archaeologist, you've got a librarian, and you've got sort of a grandma, both officially and unofficially, to a bunch of different kids that may or may not be her own. How did you land on those three archetypes in particular?
Okay, well, if I was going to have a library, I wanted a librarian.
Absolutely.
Also, when I was, you're a little younger than I am. When I was growing up, there were basically very few professions that women could go into. So to make Meg at the time I first started writing the books, a realistic representation of her generation, librarian was one of the acceptable professions for a woman of her age. Teg, I knew we were going to be digging up a site. And so I decided an archaeologist would be a really good idea. I happen to be married to an archaeologist, which makes life extremely useful. So all of the archaeology in there is actually very grounded archaeology, up to and including, Teg's multi-purpose tool belt with everything in the world on it. Because, well, if you ever saw my husband getting ready to go in the field, it looks like, Batman getting ready to go, all the different things. And then I really felt it was important to me to acknowledge that there's a big value to those women who have not had professional lives, but are raising all the kids in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
And so with Peg fills that place.
Mm-hmm.
It's my salute to all of those great women out there who are raising the kids, who are learning a million different things in order to embrace and encourage those kids in all of their different activities. I mean, I have a sister who our family was not exactly super sports oriented, but when her little boy wanted to play baseball, my sister dove in and learned everything about baseball.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Peg. And she turns out to be incredibly useful because
She really is.
She ends up knowing something about everything because somebody, a kid, a grandkid, a step grandkid, somebody's best friend was into whatever. My favorite moment was when it turns out she knows how to pick locks.
Yes.
Because
I have just reached the part.
Yeah.
I've just reached the part. And oh, sorry, you continue. You're the guest.
No, that's okay. But I love that because a bunch of my friends had come over with locks and were like, when we were role-playing gaming and their characters were off stage, they were practicing picking locks. And I was like, oh, this is so something Peg would have gotten into.
And it's so accurate too, because one of my favorite things when I worked with teens was how enthusiastic they could be about really, really specific things.
Oh,
I know more about the Yu-Gi-Oh card game than I ever wanted to know. And I had one kid in particular who, for whatever reason, was really into tarantulas. And he would come in and, like, if the room was empty and there was nothing else that he wanted to do, he would just come to my desk and we would chat about tarantulas for like 30 minutes. And I did not know that there was so much in the world to know about tarantulas, but I could write a book about them because of this kid. And a lot of them, like, they'll have these really, really specific, wonderful interests, and they will just be so enthusiastic about them.
yes.
And I absolutely love that about working with kids and teens.
And so here's Peg,
who
has been married 3 times, has kids from her different marriages, has stepkids because she's married people with kids. And so she's had a crash course in just about everything in the universe.
Oh yeah. And I really love what you did with her character too, because you touched on this earlier, but I feel like when I was growing up, there was a lot of condescension to people who wanted to say grow up to be stay-at-home moms and things like that. Just because that particular era of feminism that I grew up in. But as I've reached adulthood, I realize what an incredible feat it is to not only raise a child, but raise a competent child.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because there was a period, like my one of my careers was teaching. I lasted a year in that, and you learn that some people are not as competent at raising children as others.
Oh.
And it's if someone ends up a competent human, it's an amazing thing to me based upon some of the people I encountered, both parents and kids, when I was teaching. But I really love that she is a character who gives credit to that kind of woman because they're so valuable. But I also love that you have a woman in a traditionally female career, but then you also have your archaeologist, which I don't really think of as a traditionally female career. It's kind of the adventure career. And it's like you feel different archetypes with these 3 main characters. And it's just a really cool setup.
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting, but a lot of archaeologists are female.
Really?
And they're out there doing the hard work with the guys. My husband's first major boss was a female archaeologist. So there's a long tradition, and she led major field projects that would be in the field for months on end.
That's
So,
cool.
oh yeah. So Teg is not stretching reality at all.
I would have never realized that about archaeology. That's really neat.
Yep. There
Cool.
we go. I see we have a question in the chat
Oh,
field.
yes, we do. Let's see here. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. Hold it, I just covered it. When you sit down to shift out a book, do you write the ending first and work back? Do you write all the characters and then put them in a story? Or do you write a story, then figure out the characters? Oh, we got a bunch of good questions here.
Okay. I'm going to disappoint you terribly. I never know what the ending of a book is. On the number line of plotter and pantser, intuitive or outliner, I am so far on the intuitive end of the strain that I really don't know where the book is going until I'm writing it and getting there. There is a gut feeling that after doing this full time since 1994, I know when the book is there in the back of my head, and I start writing it. The last book I did with David Weber, the two of us actually sat down and outlined the living daylights out of it for a variety of reasons. It's the first time in my long and checkered career I've ever written from an outline.
Really?
And, yeah. And it worked in part because it helped me stay grounded in a universe somebody else had created. But I feel absolutely no desire to do it on my own solo projects. I hop into the adventure feet first with my characters. No, I don't write all the characters and then put them in the story. I start with the core group who walks into whatever story and then develop the people they meet as we go. A minor character might be square bracket X, square bracket Y, until I decide whether they're important enough to actually need a full detailed description or whether they're going to just be a walk on. And it often surprises me which person turns out to be really important and which person doesn't. And let's see, and do I write the story and then figure out the characters? No, I'm pretty much character driven. I'll start with a concept and idea. I'll come up with the characters who are going to play around with that idea. And then together we find out what's going to happen next.
That actually leads me into my next question. Varese, Zarak, and Grunwald, I want to talk about them. How did you determine what their problems were going to be that they needed the Teg, Peg, and Meg's help on? I love saying their names, Teg, Peg, and Meg. They just have a nice cadence and sound together.
I know. I don't normally do that. I normally am so careful to make sure character names are really different, but that's how they walked on stage, and they absolutely refused to let me change it.
I know that feeling.
You know, so I sometimes I have to live with what my characters insist on.
I like them because there's a certain sense of, I guess, whimsy to the rhyme that provides, like, there's certainly there's a certain amount of whimsy in the world itself, but there are also some very serious and sometimes dark things that happen in it. So it's neat when those little whimsical moments show up to balance them out. It's a very well balanced world.
Yeah. So you asked about my Inquisitors problems. Yes. And they're called Inquisitors because the translation spell that is enabling people from my world to communicate with the people over where basically took the concept of, we have questions we want answered, and turned it into inquisitions, which rather shocked my characters from our world. Yes. But it stuck. And so let's see. Grunwald's question, Inquisition, has to do with an illness to his father that no one will talk to him about and basically let him deal with. His is the one that superficially seems the most direct. I don't want to talk more about it because, like I said, everybody's lying. And so Varese comes from, her problem is she absolutely believes she has a little sister. No one is talking about the little sister. Whenever she tries to bring the little sister up, Her parents deny she ever had a little sister. She's absolutely certain she has one. In Zarak's case, Zarak is sort of a genius prodigy baby wizard. Well, he's actually the oldest of the lot. He's closer to his mid-20s. But for a wizard, that's pretty baby.
Mhm.
And one day his teacher, his master, vanishes without a trace. No one can find him. He can't find him. He spent the last year looking for him. And he's actually the one who is first going to go and ask for supernatural help. And the other two, who are childhood friends of his, come along. He tells them he's doing this, and they say, we've got issues too. Let's go with you. This world has a specific concept that I really love, and I wish our world had it. And that is, they acknowledge that there's such a thing as a holdback.
I love the concept of the holdback. To a certain extent, tragic that it happens, but I like it intellectually.
Yeah. And so a holdback is acknowledged as somebody who, for whatever reason, has something that until they deal with that problem, they're not going to be able to move forward. Mm-hmm. And what I like about it is the fact that this world acknowledges that this is something that some people have to deal with. Unlike our world, which, no matter the culture, seems to be basically like, hey, get over it, move on, go on mm-hmm. with your life, and doesn't acknowledge the fact that just sometimes there's something that until you straighten it out in your head, mm-hmm. you're not going to necessarily have that. You're not necessarily going to have that answer to that question. So in all of my three characters, they acknowledge that they're holdbacks and need help in order to move forward. And there's no shame associated with that acknowledgement. Mm-hmm. That's something I really, really wanted to deal with, because I think in our world, just sometimes it would be a little nicer if there was no shame associated with that. Mm-hmm.
And I can see that in my own life too, because one of my biggest challenges, and a lot of people who have watched the show already know this about me. I had a really enormous problem just getting my thoughts together and focusing at a certain point. And it was something that became a tremendous life-affecting problem. And to a certain extent was kind of my holdback, because there were certain adult things that it was keeping me from being able to function well enough to do. And long story short, I was diagnosed with OCD, had figured out coping techniques to deal with it. And from that point, it was a life-changing thing, because I went from not being able to think straight and not being able to finish the sequel to my first book to releasing, I forget the number now, but it's like 8 books in 2 years. Right. And it was an enormous thing, but it was something I absolutely, like, I couldn't have just like put my head down and just shoved through it. I had to figure out a practical way to figure out what the problem was and how to fix it. Right. And I'm very lucky that, like, I'm from a family and I have friends who are very supportive of people wanting to, who want to fix their problems, and who are very supportive of helping me get through it, because it was a time to get through it. And with things like OCD, it's not something you ever really get rid of. You just have to constantly deal. Right. But it was very significant to me, and that support was very significant.
Right. And so that's what I wanted in part to deal with. Like you said, mm-hmm. the book can seem light and fluffy, but there's some serious issues underlying it. And one of them for me was, all 3 of these people have hit the point where they say, I need help. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, they live in a world and in a culture where it's okay to ask for help.
One thing I really loved about the way your world was set up too was its general concept of adulthood, because obviously maturity and growing up and coming of age is a significant theme in this series in a lot of ways. But I really appreciated that adulthood is not an age in this setting. Adulthood is a state of mind and a certain level of competence, and everyone reaches it at a different point in this setting. And I really like that concept as well. it's a very mature setting in that way.
Yeah. It
And
it meant a lot to me, and it also was a great way to make this automatically an alien world and culture. You
yeah.
are not automatically an adult at any one point. Adulthood is something that has to be acknowledged or granted to you. So,
Oh, we've got more questions in the comments. Let's see. We've got another one from Lance. I'm going to put on the screen here. Show it. Says, so as you mentioned, writing from an outline with David Weber was much different than how you normally write. How difficult is it to write in, say, the Honorverse with ensuring that the timeline stays in line and you don't end up, oh, I got to go back to my comment here because it's long. And you don't, let's see, you don't end up having to retcon things. How do you deal with that in the universes you created?
okay, going back, David Weber is in charge of trying to keep things in order in the Honorverse. In the global sense, however, I do an awful lot of it for the series. In fact, he'll come up with something and I'll be like, sorry, bud, that's not going to work because you've put that character at an age where that's going to completely undo everything. And he's like, oh, right, let's go back and fix it. So you might say he's definitely in charge of the global, but I take a big responsibility for trying to keep the specifics, because if you ever met David Weber, he's basically a 6'4" Cocker Spaniel puppy.
That's a great way to describe him. Oh my gosh.
But isn't it the right? Isn't
it's
that
true? Yeah.
You know, he's like,
I'm never going to unsee that now.
But he's full of enthusiasm. He's full of energy. He's full of vigor, especially when coming up with ideas. And he'll go, oh, I got a shiny. I got a shiny. I got a
shiny moment. Yes.
Yeah. And then you have to sometimes gently wind him back and say, lovely idea, love. But now I got to explain just slightly. My relationship with David Weber is probably different than everybody else's at Baines. Weber and I have been friends since I had one published short story and he had 1.5 novels.
Yeah, you go way back.
We go way back. You know, he's like, we're good buddies, and we can argue and, you know, come back around because we value the friendship. He talked me into not running into a panic when I got into my relationship with my current husband, because I really didn't want another relationship because I had just finished going through hell. You know, he's my buddy. And I think that makes a big difference in putting these books together. Mm-hmm. In my universes, I do try and keep track of things. Sometimes I do fumble, but very rarely, because I am a horribly organized human being. And, you know, and so I do keep track. But then I've never done anything of the scope of the Honorverse. So there's no comparing.
Oh yeah, the Honorverse is huge.
It's
blows
huge.
my mind how much detail there is in the Honorverse.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is between two ears. I really, really wish some of the stuff, you know, the House of Steel book is very, very oriented toward the military aspects of it. But for example, when we started doing the Star Kingdom books, which are heavily planet-based and a lot about the tree cats, I had to point out to Weber where he had contradicted himself at various points. And we've been trying to do is basically make it work to his vision, not to what's on the page. What's more important is that the vision of this alien species comes across right. Mm-hmm. That's the most important thing. So if we have to wiggle things a little bit, we wiggle it, because the vision is what we're trying to get across.
And I really love the way you two depicted the tree cats in that series.
I start with what he had and then I build on it. I don't have any particular need. I've got my own universes and my own work. I don't need to say, I did this thing. Darling, maybe we could try a little more light now. We're beginning to lose light. It's interesting. It's New Mexico, and that means I'm at 2 hours different from you.
Oh,
So
yes.
Nope, that's too much. Whee!
We're very illuminated now.
Yep, we'll give up on that. So there you go.
Yeah.
So there you go. And thank you, Carrie, for liking the taking a look at this series and thinking it'd be fun. I think for me, I've never written a book that I didn't think was fun, but this one is a bit more of a romp than some I've done.
Mm-hmm. And it's a really great romp. I love it so much. We got another question. This is another one from Lance. Let's see. Come on up here. How do you decide when your character's story has come to an end, like, say, Elizabeth Moon and Paxtonarian? What's your cue for when it's over?
That hasn't happened yet. I'll let you know when I know. But even what I tend to do more is, for example, my wolf books with Firekeeper, I would rather take a break and not write a book in that universe for a couple of years or more, even though I would make more money just only writing about Firekeeper, and then getting the right idea and going ahead and saying, now I want to go back and I want to be with those people again. So I don't have a decision point. Maybe it's a result of my life, my age, what I've been through, but I don't really think there's ever a happy ever after stop in people's life. And you could say that that's one of the things I'm dealing with in the Overwear books. There's a really brutal point in one of the books where, Meg, Peg, and Teg are talking to their 3 younger friends about, well, we can afford to be gone because we're essentially disposable. And
I remember that one, yeah.
And the young people are shocked. But in our culture, especially women after a certain age, are often considered, no longer of interest, off stage.
Yeah. You kind of get forgotten past a certain point.
Yeah. And yet that's not at all the case in reality. So I wanted to write some characters who may be in their 70s, 60s, 50s, and they don't think it's time to just sit at home and knit. Peg brings her knitting along.
Yeah, I love that she's always knitting in the background. I mean, it's such a small little detail, but it's so charming when they're on this big fantasy adventure, and she's got her knitting needles out and doling out wisdom, and she knits amongst all these stereoanthropic characters. It's there are so many charming little details in this series that I just absolutely love.
One of my favorites is Teg's constant question as to whether she's going to quit smoking or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's with these people with really sharp sense of smell, and they do not approve of her cigarettes one bit.
Yeah, and I love too how there are certain details that echo between the Mentors and the Inquisitors, because you've got her and her smoking, but then you've got Zarak, who has his drinking. Some consider it a problem, some he doesn't because he has reasons for it, but they're definitely not entirely healthy habits, and they can both connect to each other on that, or they both connect to each other on that point. It's just I really love the way things are interwoven.
Yeah, and Varese has her own issues too. One of hers is, she's sort of not quite sure how to be a person, because she's very fixated on romance. And that's something she's going to have to deal with as these books
she's got some complicated stuff on that point. And I really liked her story for that reason too, because it's a relatable story for someone of that age. Like, if you're a very love-struck youth, I mean, your logic is perhaps not as strong as it should be, and she in avoiding spoilers, she kind of gets the worst of it in some ways. But I really love the way her story developed because of that. We're 40 minutes in and we haven't actually talked about book 3 yet. Now I do know this was originally supposed to be a duology, and the right. Am I wrong? It was original. Okay. For some reason I thought it was just going to be 2 books. And
no, what happened is I started writing this just for my own amusement. And it growed until it was really kind of long. And then I had to put it on side because I got the rights back for the Firekeeper books, and I had to do some Firekeeper stuff. And then Weber finally crawled out from under a rock and was ready to do more stuff with Star Kingdom. And so they sat on hold for a couple of years. And then I suddenly had a hole in my schedule. And I said to Jim, I said, I'm going to pull that manuscript out I was working on. I loved it when I was doing it, but I wonder if I still will. And I was completely in love. And by the time I finished going through it, filling in things that needed to be filled in, etc., there was no way I could publish it in the current marketplace as one book. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking seriously as I was writing it that I was going to indie pub it because, what publisher out there would want a book about 3 old ladies on an adventure? But I was working with Tony Weisskopf at Baen already with the works with David Weber. Mm-hmm. And I said to my friend Chuck Gannon, who I've known since the world was a much younger place. I was still an undergrad, and Chuck writes for Baen. I said, do you think Baen has this reputation for military science fiction, but what do you think? And he said, no, go for it. They're doing a lot more than just military science fiction. Mm-hmm. And so I ran it by Tony, and I'd say she was back to me in an amazingly short time, but we both agreed that with the current marketplace, it needed to be broken into 2 books. Mm-hmm. So but I always wanted it to be an open-ended series. Mm-hmm. So House of Rough Diamonds was not planned, so to speak, but the door was always open to do it. And in fact, I've been roughing out material for another book after it.
Yes. Nice. So books 1 and 2, for those who are unfamiliar with the series, basically cover the 3 main characters helping the Inquisitors out with their various problems to help them overcome being holdbacks and get on with adult life. What's book 3 about?
Book 3 is, at the end of Library of the Sapphire Wind, they found the Library of the Sapphire Wind. They know why they had to find the Library of the Sapphire Wind. And they're very attached to the Library of the Sapphire Wind. Meg is sort of finding a new best friend in the, genius loci of the library.
We should clarify for people who haven't read the books, the library kind of has its own consciousness and personality. Like, it's not just a storehouse for books and artifacts. It's a whole thing.
Yep. So they have been thinking of the library as theirs, but they realize just finders keepers. It does not mean it's theirs. Mm-hmm. So House of Rough Diamonds is in part the story of them doing what they need to do to claim the library, but it's also the problem of there's something, the library, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but the library books basically come to them and say something's destroying us. Beware the book wraith, help. So at the same time that they're trying to do what it takes to earn the right to have this incredibly valuable property that at the same time is highly dangerous and non-insurable. I'm very practical. Insurance is an issue because it's so dangerous. On the other hand, there's something in the library that's a danger in itself. So they're dealing with a 2-front conflict. Can we get the right to keep the library, and can we save the library before the library is destroyed by something we don't even know what the heck it is?
Oh, yes. I'm looking forward to reading this. I literally got it. Like, it arrived on my doorstep like 45 minutes ago. Well, not 45 minutes ago at this point, an hour and 45 minutes ago in the rain. So it's actually a little damp hanging out on my display here. So yeah, I'd fully intended to read all the way through, and then I got hit with the worst cold of my life like 2 weeks ago. Like, I was incoherent in bed for 2 straight days, and then just a zombie around the house, and I was not reading and retaining anything. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I tried to read some of Aurora Borealis Bridge while I was sick, and then I opened it up the first day I was well, and I was like, I know I've read these past 50 pages, but I don't remember a single
Yep.
thing.
I've
And
been
so I
there.
had to go back. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to continuing it. All right, we have about 15 minutes left, and I had another question, but I forgot what it was. Oh,
Okay,
I
well,
remember now.
you remember your question. Carrie has one here.
Oh, yes.
Can I talk? I want to answer it. Are
Yeah,
the books
Carrie.
appropriate to kids? And the answer is, I don't think for a 9-year-old. I think that HP, especially some of the stuff with Veriz, I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree. I wouldn't consider, they're not like inappropriate content or anything, but some of the themes are definitely heavier than what I'd say the average 9-year-old is capable of really developmentally registering.
And also could be really disturbing. I mean, I love the artwork Tom Kidd did for the covers, but my only regret about it is he sort of fell in love with, if you have the first 2 books and you hold them side by side, they make one really terrific painting. You can see it on my website.
Can you guys see? Okay, there we go.
Yeah,
that is awesome. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, but because he was caught up with the Aurora Borealis colors, they come across as a little bit lighter than they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not kids' books. And, you know, I love having Tom Kidd do the artwork and am thrilled by it. But I do worry a little bit that people who will like a good, exciting adventure fantasy are going to not pick them up because they'll think, oh, this is a kid's book, animals and bright colors.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, people who will pick them up because, oh, look, animals and bright colors are going to go, oh my gosh, we've got some really heavy content in here. Yeah. So I'm sort of torn because I think the packaging does not necessarily portray the emotion content of the book. So thank you for taking the adventure alone. Maybe when your daughter is, say, 14, 15, you guys could pick them up together. It might actually open some really good discussion points.
Yeah, I think it's definitely safe for 14 and up.
Yeah.
I remembered my question.
Yeah. What's your question?
So Aurora Borealis Bridge actually has the perfect opening for and the moment I read the opening, I was like, this is a perfect way to recap the story, and it's also going to be a perfect question to ask in this interview. So Aurora Borealis Bridge opens with the main characters talking about how their story would be adapted if it were made into, say, a movie or TV series or whatever in back home in their quote unquote real world. So I'm curious, if you could have this adapted, what would be your ideal style of adaptation?
I'm horrible for that because I really don't watch movies. I don't watch very much television. When I do watch something, it's anime.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, even though some of the special effects for movies and television have gotten really, really good, I'm not quite sure that they're up to doing justice to the therianthropic characters in the movies. Oddly enough, some of the stuff I've seen in video games looks better. It's like the movies. Yeah, it's like the movies have yet to catch up to some of the graphics, especially for fantasy and science fiction that I see in video games.
Yeah, video games are crazy these days with the level of graphics that they're
yeah. So if they could do a movie or television series where it was that level of graphics, I think I could handle it. But otherwise, I think I'd rather see it done as a really good anime.
Yeah, I could see it as an anime. Of course, I would watch everything as an anime. I'm literally watching a show called Reborn as a Vending Machine. Now I Wander the Dungeon right now.
Yes, I've seen that. I haven't watched it. I have this hang up that so many things that are started as an anime don't get finished in this country.
Yeah.
So these days I tend to look for things that are a complete series.
Yeah.
Because I fell in love with my favorite anime, and it has yet to be finished. It may never be finished because the creator has health issues. So
I started watching that, by the way, on my sick days. Yeah, just Jane and I have been talking via email and whatnot, and which is naturally how we both found out we're anime fans. And so I'd been searching around, and I finally managed to find there was a Blu-ray edition of Sayuki that was released a few years ago, and it's unfortunately it's not like it hasn't been remastered or the visuals upgraded, so it's still like the visual quality for modern televisions is actually not that great, but the show itself is super fun, and it gets moments too.
Oh my God, does it get dark?
Oh yeah, and I'm already I want to say I'm like 10 episodes in, and you're already beginning to see hints of that. But yeah, it's been really fun thus far. It surprises me that it hasn't been finished though. There's so many series.
It's mostly because the creator has had some serious health issues, and it really takes her at the helm. They've done filler episodes and stuff, and they're just not as good. But she's got the right balance for those characters.
I see. Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching more. There have been there's the main series, but then there's a few offshoots too, right? There's 2 or 3 either sequel series or offshoot series. I might be wrong.
Sequel series and prequel series. I would be happy to bore you to tears about it in an email.
We're gonna have to do an episode where we just talk about anime at some point, because that'll be a fun one. Because there's several authors in my little circle that are anime fans, and so we're definitely gonna have to do that. All right, let's see, it's 8:52. We got about 7 minutes left. What else can we talk about? Let's see. Oh, one question that I have: what's your thought process for determining which animals each character has the aspect of? Is there a process, or is it, or do you just go like this character vibes with this animal? That's what their head's going to be.
I was definitely looking for one thing, didn't want any of my main characters to have a wolf aspect, because I've done so much with wolves that I didn't want any crossover on that. So I avoided that directly. Beyond that, my goal in the long term is to show the whole wide mixture that's in there. And I do have a long list of animal types that I'm doing. And there are, as is explained in there, certain genetic predispositions. So Zerak, who is leonine, his mother actually looks like a tufted-eared squirrel. So if I was to go back into his family, we need to either have some lion genes in his dad or grandparents or whatever. And one of the things I really like about this world is people don't automatically gravitate toward people who, quote, look like them. And in fact, when that question is brought up, they're sort of horrified. Yeah. And Grunwald explains that, no, if I was only dating people who were, he's got a stag's head, so basically we're other deer type people. My parents would probably be asking me, do you have some ego problems here that you can only fall in love with yourself? So Grunwald's dad, Connell, looks like him, a stag head, but his mother looks like a camel. Again, I was trying to break some of the automatic assumptions we have from our world, where a lot of our cultures are still insular enough that people tend to gravitate toward people of a similar culture and background and appearance, enough so that it's still an issue when people marry outside of that. I wanted to have a world where let's turn that inside out. And if you had a family where everybody, kept repeating the same motifs, people would go, these people have a bit of a problem. They're a little too in love with themselves, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, I had another question that just came to mind. The concept of reincarnation in this universe is a really, really cool aspect, and it's one that I wasn't really expecting when I first picked up the book. And so I wanted to say, first off, for people who are new to the series, explain how reincarnation works in this setting, because it is a verifiable thing that happens.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just a belief system.
Right.
And as a second part, I was curious, what inspired that addition to the series? Because it ends up having significant implications, especially in book 2.
Yeah. Often when I write a book, I like to take one thing that we automatically take for granted in our world and throw it for a loop. And in this one, I really thought it would be very interesting to have a culture where they knew the soul was immortal, not believed, knew. You know, no matter how much any of our religions across the spectrum do it, nobody has yet documented really what happens after. This is a culture where they know that their soul lives after, but you don't always remember who you were. Wizards are more likely to eventually remember who they were. It's not always a great thing. So again, it's one of the things that bores me about a lot of fantasy fiction is it's just our world with the serial numbers filed off. I wanted to throw in a couple of root and base differences, and reincarnation is one of them here. So in this particular world, sure, they have religion, but religion has more to do with morals, ethics, how you're going to live your life, not about whether you get the cookie in the afterlife.
Right. And I really love the scene that describes that too. But of course, that's a common motif. I love everything about these books.
Thank you.
All right, we have come to the end. We've got about 3 minutes, and I just wanted to reiterate, we are giving away a signed copy of this book. So I'm going to put the link in the comments again to make it easy to find. But again, go click that form, fill it out. We will select a winner, and then have the book in the mail to the winner very soon. Lance says, "Wait, the afterlife has cookies." The good ones.
Yeah, you know, the harp. You know, whether you get the harp and the halo sitting on the cloud, or the girls in scanty dresses, or the giant beer mugs, you know, the cookies of the afterlife.
Yes.
And I may not get books in the mail until after next week, because I take off for Texas and a brand new shiny convention called Pecan as of Thursday. And I have one heck of a busy week before I got it.
Are you the guest of honor? I
am one of the guests of honor.
One of the guests of honor, yeah.
And my longtime buddy, Chuck Gannon, is the other one. And we're going to sit down and do what we used to do many years ago on my dorm floor and play role-playing games, except in this case, we'll have an audience.
Oh my gosh, that's going to be great. I love that. I already love that con just because of the name Pecan. I just, it's a little pun, and I'm a sucker for puns.
So a book will go in the mail, but it might not go in the mail until after this week. Depends on whether I can find time.
The wait will make the reward that much sweeter.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, there we go. But yeah, this has been a great interview. So thank you for joining me. And again, everyone, Jane Lindskold, please go by and read and love the House of Rough Diamonds and every other book she's written. It just came out this week, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah. So it's nice, fresh, hot off the presses book. Where else? You've got Pecan coming up. Where else can they find you online, or your books, or any other fun information you want to put out there?
I have a website. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, and that's it. I need a life separate from the virtual.
All right. Well, this has been a whole lot of fun. I'm glad to have you on, and we'll have you on whenever your next thing comes out too. Whatever it is, I'll be looking forward to it. And of course, audience, thank you for joining. Your questions have been amazing, and we will see you next time. So,
see you next time. Bye-bye.